Let me ask you something. Have you ever sat there with that heavy, quiet feeling that you're never really doing enough, even when you're doing everything? You check all the boxes, you show up, you handle your business, and still, there's that voice in the back of your head whispering that it could have been better, that you could have been better. If that sounds familiar, there's a good chance you're carrying something around you don't even realize is weighing you down. And that thing, that's perfectionism. So welcome back, everybody, to the MDNGHT Collective podcast. Once again, I am your host, Eddie, and today's episode is going to be about something I think a lot of men quietly struggle with, and it's not just messing with our progress, it's messing with our peace. Perfectionism is one of those mindsets that looks noble on the surface, but it can sound like high standards, like ambition, like pride in your work. But if you dig deep beneath that surface, what you'll often find is something much heavier. Fear, shame, pressure, and a constant exhausting need to perform. This conversation isn't just about being too hard on yourself. It's about that internal expectation that you always have to look the part, always be on point, always be composed, polished, successful, and in control. It's a belief that there's no room for error, no space to fumble, fall, or figure out in real time. We've already talked about honesty and how telling the truth to yourself is the first step to growth. We've talked about distraction and how it keeps us numb and disconnected from purpose. And we've talked about discipline, not as pressure, but as structure that allows you to build consistently. But today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the illusion that sits underneath all of that. The illusion that says, if I just do it perfectly, then I'll finally be enough. For most of us, perfectionism doesn't come from laziness. It's not a lack of desire. It's not an absence of drive. In fact, it's often the opposite. You care deeply. You want to get it right. You don't want to let anyone down. Not your family, not your partner, not your team, not even yourself. But instead of fueling growth, that mindset starts to choke it. It makes every mistake feel personal. It makes every delay feel like failure. It makes the process feel like punishment and the pressure unbearable. And the worst part, we normalize it. We wear it like a badge of honor. But perfectionism doesn't make you stronger, it makes you smaller, quieter, more disconnected, even frozen. And if you're living under the weight of that right now, this episode is going to be for you. We're going to talk about where perfectionism really comes from and what it's actually costing you, and how to let it go without losing your drive or lowering your standards of life. This one's about freedom, not from work, not from growth, but from the lie that says you have to be flawless in order to be worthy. So, take a breath, sit back, you're in the right place. So let's get into it. So now, if we want to move forward, we need to start looking back. Not to live there, but to understand how we got here in the first place. Because perfectionism doesn't just show up one day. It's not something you decide to adopt. It's something you absorb over time. It's shaped quietly, sometimes painfully, by a series of moments, messages, and expectations that get internalized long before you realize what's been done to us. For a lot of us, it starts early. Maybe it was the father figure who only gave attention when you were achieving. He never said, "I'm proud of you," unless you won. Even then, maybe he told you how you could have done it better. Or the coach who didn't care about effort unless it led to victory. You could pour your heart out on the field, but if the scoreboard didn't reflect it, you were invisible. Or the military training that drilled into you that mistakes aren't just costly, they're unacceptable. That anything less than precision is failure. Maybe it wasn't any one person. Maybe it was the culture around you. Media, schools, peers, constantly reinforcing the idea that a real man is composed, unshakable, always in control, that emotion is weakness, that not having it all together means you're not doing enough. These influences, big and small, add up, and what they create isn't resilience, it's a survival mindset. It tells you, if I can just perform well enough, no one will see where I feel like I'm falling apart inside. So you armor up. You become the high achiever, the responsible one, the guy who gets things done. And at first, it works. People admire your work ethic. They respect your discipline. You become reliable, impressive, maybe even successful. But over time, that armor gets heavier. That pressure starts to outweigh the purpose. And you're no longer doing it because you love it. You're doing it because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. That's the root of perfectionism for so many men. It starts with a strategy for approval, but turns into a silent prison of pressure. So what happens next? We start overthinking every decision because we're terrified of making the wrong one. We overcompensate, going above and beyond, not because we want to, but because we feel like we have to in order to be enough. We overprepare. We spend more time getting ready to act than actually doing. Because if we can't guarantee a perfect outcome, we'd rather not try at all. And that's where perfectionism shows its real face, in paralysis. You want to move forward, but you feel stuck. You want to grow, but you can't stand the idea of failing publicly. You want to be seen, but only if you can control how you're seen. So you stay behind the scenes. You stall. You spin your wheels in a cycle of refinement and delay, waiting for a moment of confidence that never comes. Because your self-worth is still chained to the image of flawless execution. Here's the truth though. You can't grow if you're afraid of being seen mid-process. You can't lead if your worth is based on always getting it right. And you definitely can't become who you're meant to be if you're only willing to show up as the polished version. Perfectionism convinces us that anything less than 100% isn't worth showing. And in doing so, it robs us of the one thing we actually need to do to get better. Practice. You want to be more confident, more present, more grounded? You have to be willing to be seen becoming, not just arriving. So right now we're just going to take a little moment to call this what this really is, because I think it's time we stop dressing it up. Perfectionism is not about holding yourself to high standards. It's not about being driven. It's not about striving for excellence or pushing yourself to be your best. And it's definitely not some badge of honor that means that you care more than everyone else. At its core, perfectionism is about fear. It's fear that you're going to be judged, fear that you're going to fall short, or that people will see the cracks and you decide you're not enough. Fear that if you don't perform, you'll disappoint the people who believe in you. And worse, confirm the doubts of the people who don't. So instead of letting yourself be seen in process, growing, fumbling, learning, you work overtime to curate the image. You polish, you control, you perfect. Not because it brings you peace, but because it feels safer than the possibility of being misunderstood, underestimated, or even criticized. That's what perfectionism really is. It's fear, dressed up to look like discipline. It's anxiety, masked as ambition. On the outside, it looks clean, responsible, put together. People might even praise it. But on the inside, it's usually coming from a place of shame avoidance. A deep, quiet belief that who you are, as you are, might not be good enough. So you stay on the hamster wheel of proving. You don't take risks unless you know you're going to win. You don't speak until you've rehearsed the words in your head a dozen times. You don't try new things unless you guarantee that they're going to make you look competent. Over time, that mindset doesn't just affect your work, it starts bleeding into every area of your life. It disconnects you. It disconnects you from your creativity because you won't let yourself play, explore, or create without obsessing over how it will be received. It disconnects you from your relationships because vulnerability gets replaced with image management. You're afraid to be real, afraid to be raw, afraid to be in process in front of other people. And it disconnects you from your peace because that mental load of keeping up the act becomes your full-time job. You don't rest. Not really. Because even your rest feels like another thing to optimize. And eventually, it's not just the work that's never good enough. You're not good enough. At least that's the story perfectionism starts to whisper. Perfectionism isolates you. It puts you in a cage made of your own expectations. And it's a heavy cage. The kind that doesn't always look like the struggle from the outside, but feels more like pressure every time you wake up. It's the pressure to look calm when you're anxious, to seem successful when you're uncertain, to be everything to everyone while slowly losing yourself in the process. This is why perfectionism is so dangerous, because it hides behind language that sounds noble. It masquerades as responsibility. It convinces you that you're just being hard on yourself because you care. But there's a big difference between being committed and being afraid to be seen not having it all together. So I'll say this clearly. The goal is to not abandon your standards. You can still strive. You can still pursue excellence. You can still want more for yourself. But if the pursuit is driven by fear, not by purpose, it will always leave you empty no matter how much you accomplish. And that emptiness, that's not who you are. That's a signal, a red flag waving, trying to remind you that you were never meant to earn your worth through flawlessness. You were meant to show up as you are and build from there. But there's another layer to this that I'd be missing if I didn't bring it up, and that's the role that comparison plays in feeding perfection. And I'm super guilty of this also. But especially today in the world that we live in, social media has made it almost impossible not to compare. Every scroll is a curated snapshot, the perfect body, the perfect couple, the perfect six-figure business that somebody you know made out of nothing. You want to be there. You want to be that successful. It also looks like the emotionally available husband who makes his wife matcha every morning, the dad who somehow always has time, patience, and a six-pack. We're not just comparing ourselves to people, we're comparing ourselves to avatars, to filtered versions, highlight reels, edited personas. And we forget that we're measuring ourselves against not even real things. But your nervous system doesn't know that. All it sees is he's further ahead. She's more successful. They're doing it better. Take, for instance, this podcast. We're growing slowly at a snail's pace, but we're growing. And every time I see views, comments, likes, shares, follows, that's something to be proud of. That's something that I'm proud of. So seeing people that have more successful things than I do, that creates that mindset that I need to do better. I need to perfect this podcast. I need to perfect my social media management. I need to perfect the image so that people want it. And that makes me long for being perfect. But from that, the perfectionist narrative kicks in and says, I need to catch up. I need to do it cleaner. I need to do it faster. And I need to do it like that. Maybe I shouldn't do it at all. That's how comparison feeds perfectionism. Not just by raising the bar, but by outsourcing your sense of value. It convinces you that your life, your timeline, your growth, it's not valid unless they look like someone else's. And when that happens, your worth becomes conditional. Your progress becomes invisible. And your peace, the one thing you actually need to grow, gets swallowed up in shame. So here's a hard truth that you need to hear straight from me. You're not behind. You're not failing, and you are not less than. You're just watching someone else's chapter 20 while you're trying to write your chapter 2. And forgetting that the only story that actually matters is yours. Let their wins inspire you. Let their success prove what's possible. But don't let it become the reason you stop moving. Because perfectionism doesn't just come from inside of you. It's often fueled by the pressure to keep up with a version of someone else that isn't even fully true. So if you're caught in that loop right now, pause, mute the noise, come back to your lane, and ask yourself, what does my progress look like today? That's where your peace lives. That's where your discipline begins. That's where perfectionism starts to loosen its grip. And when that grip loosens, you start to see what it cost you, what it did to you, what chasing that perfect image really took from you. So let's talk about that. The real cost. Perfectionism doesn't just shape your thinking. It shapes your entire experience of life. It quietly dictates how you show up, how you express yourself, how you move through the world, and over time, it doesn't just make things harder, it starts to steal things from you. It steals your momentum, your peace. It steals joy, even from your victories. And I'm super guilty of that. I don't celebrate my victories whatsoever, and I haven't for a long time. But I've been trying to do that better. I've been trying to see my wins as actual wins, not just, well, I didn't do this soon enough. My cousins did it faster. My coworkers have got this before I did. That joy is gone because you didn't do it as fast as others. You didn't do it happily. You didn't do it in a way that was the perfect way. It took you longer. It took you more steps. And you might just say things like, well, I wasn't ready yet. But to be honest, perfectionism is probably the reason that thing you wanted to start or do still hasn't left your notebook or your notes app. Whether it's a business, a blog, a project, or even a podcast like this, it's the fear of not getting it right the first time that keeps you standing still. It's not that you don't have the talent or the drive. You're just convinced that if it can't be perfect, it's not worth beginning. And that belief, it keeps you stuck at the starting line, constantly tweaking and overthinking and planning, but never launching. And when you live like that long enough, it starts to bleed into other areas of your life. You stop trusting your voice. You start second guessing your instincts. You overanalyze every decision until even the simplest choices start to feel heavy. Eventually, you don't just fear failure, you fear exposure. The possibility of being seen in process becomes more uncomfortable than the pain of being stuck. So you retreat. You stay quiet. You keep it to yourself. It doesn't stop at work or creativity either. Perfectionism follows you into your relationships. You hesitate to open up. You downplay how you feel. You tell people you're fine when you're not. You bottle things up because you're afraid that being real will make you look messy, or worse, weak. And the irony, you probably give everyone else grace. You probably love people better than you love yourself. But when it comes to you, the standards are impossibly high, and you constantly move. You don't let yourself celebrate. You don't let yourself rest. You don't give yourself permission to feel proud, because there's always something more you could have done, something you missed, something you should have done better. Even when you win, perfectionism steps in and says, yeah, well, it wasn't that big of a deal. Or, sure, but look how long it took me. That's not excellence, that's self-sabotage in disguise. Perfectionism doesn't just build your progress, it builds pressure. And that pressure turns into paralysis. Discipline helps you move forward, one step at a time. It gives you structure and rhythm that allows growth to happen, even in small ways. But perfectionism builds walls. It builds them high, and it builds them thick. And eventually, you forget who you were before you put them up. What started as a coping mechanism, a way to avoid shame or criticism, becomes the very thing that keeps you from being known, from being seen, and from being free. Because here's the harsh truth. Perfectionism convinces you that staying stuck is safer than being vulnerable. That waiting is wiser than failing publicly. That silence is better than imperfection. And that lie is costing you time. It's costing you opportunity and your own peace. And most of all, your self-respect. You don't need to be perfect. You need to move. You need to start. You need to be honest enough to say, this matters to me and I'm going to do it even if it's messy. Because real progress isn't clean. It's gritty and it's uncertain, but it's alive. And that's what you deserve. Not a life spent editing yourself, but a life you actually get to live. So the question becomes, how do you shift this? How do you move forward when perfectionism has had a grip on you for years, maybe even decades? You don't break it by working harder. You don't fix it by waiting for confidence to show up. You don't heal it by achieving more. That's just going to get you the same cycle in disguise. You break free by letting go of the belief that you have to earn your way into worthiness. That is going to be the root. That's where the real change is going to start to happen. Because you don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You don't need to have all the answers to lead. You don't need to wait until you figure it all out before you can step up and make an impact in your home, in your community, or in your own healing. You need one thing, a willingness to begin as you are. Not polished, not packaged, not pretending, just present and real. Start where you are. Start messy. Let people see you grow. Let people see you fail and get back up. Let them see the version of you that is still in process, still learning and adjusting and building, most importantly. That's not weakness. That's strength with humility. That's leadership with depth. Because the men I respect most, the ones who lead well and leave a legacy, they're not the ones who've never fallen. They're the ones who got back up without hiding that bruise. They're the ones who said, I was wrong, but I'm working on it. The ones who stayed in the room when they were most uncomfortable. They're the ones who didn't disappear when things got uncertain. It's not confidence that makes a man trustworthy. It's commitment. Commitment to growth, to truth, and commitment to showing up even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. Your value isn't how perfect you are. It's how honest, disciplined, and resilient you are when life isn't. That's what builds character. That's what builds trust. That is what's going to build your legacy. So stop waiting for the timing to be right. Stop waiting for the fear to go away. Stop waiting for someone else to validate that you're ready. You are ready. You've always been. This isn't about abandoning your standards. It's about surrendering the belief that you have to be flawless before you're worthy of forward motion. Let go of that. Let go of the image. Let go of the story that says you have to be more before you can start. You don't need more polish. You need more presence. When you start showing up like that, real, imperfect, and willing, everything begins to shift. Not because the world changes overnight, but because you do. You start moving with a different kind of energy. One that's not based on fear, but on alignment, on truth, on ownership. That's where your power lives. That's where freedom begins. If this episode landed with you, I want to hear about it. DM me. Let me know what part of this really hit home the hardest. Don't keep it in your head. Let's talk about it. That's what the MDNGHT Collective is about. Real conversation, real connection, and real growth. And if you're building something inside yourself right now, that some kind of shift, some kind of movement, don't do it alone. Share this episode with somebody who's been battling the same pressure. Someone who's been stuck in silence, trying to keep it all together. Let them know that they're not alone. And if you haven't yet, follow the podcast, drop a review, hit that stars, not for me, but so we can keep growing this space and reaching more men who need to hear it. And don't miss next week. We're going to deep dive into a topic that affects every single one of us, even if we don't always see it. The next episode is going to be about unpacking toxic masculinity. We're going to talk about what toxic masculinity really is, what it really means. Not just as a buzzword, but as a weight men carry every day. The pressure to suppress emotions, to dominate instead of connect, to always be tough, composed, and unaffected. But the truth is, the real strength is not going to come from your silence. It's going to come from your vulnerability, from your emotional intelligence, from redefining masculinity in a way that finally includes our full humanity. So as always, keep building your legacy one decision at a time. This is the MDNGHT Collective, and I'll see you real soon.